from all the top Fortune 500 companies and venture capitalists and industrialists. Coming to Shri Suman Kalyanji. Suman Kalyanji today will be interacting. This is an interactive session. And before I conclude my brief talk, you will be getting a link of CI Live project, the registration link of CI Live project in the chat box, because our objective is not just limited to this one monologuous session and we go away. That's not the objective. Ours is a lifelong association, because this is our key focus area, to provide such industry mentorship to students, to help give them customized guidance and mentorship, which you will get through CI Live project, which is an online internship come upskilling program for students. And in past 1 year only, especially during the COVID period, when the jobs dried up and all those things, CI Live project helped many students get placed, many students start their own entrepreneurship venture, many students basically find their path of their own empowerment in their life through the mentorship of such industry leaders. So Suman Kalyanji, let me introduce him. Suman Kalyanji is an alumnus of IIT Madras and a global stalwart in the field of artificial intelligence. He is leading the AI vertical of an Israeli multinational company of advanced technology and AI. It's called NES Digital Engineering. He's also an international recruiter, and he has patents to his name in the area of machine learning and federated learning and all such advanced areas. In our CI Live project, people who perform well, we provide one-on-one guidance, and if you excel, then we also provide such industry references and placement support, and basically career optimization and acceleration guidance also. So the registration link, I believe, is shared with you. Those who of you are interested, the students can register. And what Suman Kalyanji will be sharing with you now, it will be an interactive session. You're free to ask your own questions, free to learn from his own journey, how being an IIT Madras BTech student, how he ended up here, and how he sees the world of AI changing in the coming times of fourth industrial revolution and the coming disruptive times. So it will be a very learning session. It will be a very life transforming session. So pay utmost attention, ask your questions, and hope to see you all again in our CI program of Live project. So that's all from my side. And now I would like to invite Shri Suman Kalyanji Bhai sir to take this session forward. Namaskar.
Thank you, Salil Bhaji. Did you have a word to say, Sujikar ji, before I start?
Yeah, I would like to thank Sahil Lahiri ji for the introduction of CI and Suman Kalyanji. And I think Sahil Lahiri ji, we can be in terms of a student and candidate, especially in the tech domain at this moment, in their career journey, maybe there is definite alignment between CI and what MyWest can work towards. And we'll definitely take it forward, Lahiri ji. And welcome, Suman Kalyanji. And thanks a lot for accepting our invitation at a very short notice. And then here we are. And Suman Kalyanji is joining us from Canada at the moment. So to start it, Sumanji, your entire journey itself, be it from IIT Madras, where you did your undergraduate in naval architecture, and then followed up with MS in forecasting, and from there on, be it product development, be it business development, be it strategy positioning of various enterprise related tech solutions, and even being a consultant, and now associating yourself with an Israeli company which has its internal I think foot. In this entire journey, if you can please take us through how it had been. And I think you have seen through this technology bubble in 2000, or maybe that innovation, and then now we are talking about the next fourth industrial revolution, as Sahil ji said, AI playing a major role. And in these 30 years, now we are standing at a place where Suman Kalyanji is again pioneering in terms of AI, which is the latest technology. So how could you be so agile? And it will be, I think, a great insight for all of us, your career path till now.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujikar. And thank you, Salil Sribhaji, for the kind introduction. And welcome this opportunity to speak today, share my thoughts on AI. And I've had a career of almost 23 years now and running in the domain of AI. And it's been a nice journey. And mostly it's been a very interesting journey. So I'm going to share my journey on what led me to this point. And as Sujikar was talking about how this journey started first with my admission into IIT and how by accident I came into this domain, but I consolidated and why I am where I am at this point of time. It was not all by design, but I think one thing led to the other, which things happening at the right time, and how I landed up in this domain. It's an interesting story in itself. But before that, let me just start off on a lighter note. I think I know Sujikar ji was saying he was talking.
Please take the liberty of calling me Sujikar.
Sujikar, okay. So Sujikar was talking about the examination time. So I know these could be jittery for some, and then think, okay, how am I going to do in my exams? And my guess is most of you guys listening to this live are pre-final and the final year students across different streams, across different probably engineering, economics, finance, commerce, maybe different streams that you're coming from. And to start off on a lighter note, I mean, examination is something that, if I remember, it's been like ages since I've taken an examination. And the sort of examination where you study and you have to do enough to excel, or as the case may be, pass an examination. And I would always be, amongst all my friends, I would be somebody who would be the most peaceful, most calm, and I would be like playing games, and I would be like completely at ease, completely relaxed. And people used to wonder, how come you're not stressed out? I mean, you look like completely, you go for a movie, and how is that? So the secret was really, I think that was when the AI really started in a certain sense, because I would look at all of these question papers, try to analyze and try to predict what do you think might come my way. I think that's how I used to approach examinations, looking at it the smart way as opposed to reading everything. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who would sit down and study everything. I would say, okay, I need to read enough. And I think I was lucky, and probably my analysis was pretty good, that I was able to predict.
Maybe AA came naturally to you.
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of in more often than not, I was able to predict what do you think might come my way. And so that kind of helped me. I mean, I would not claim I was a topper in my class, but I did enough to pass and maybe did better than that. So I think that was on the lighter vein. So it was very relaxing for me during examination, because one of the key lessons learned, really, jokes apart, is being able to work smart as opposed to working hard. I mean, working hard plus smart is great. I mean, that's the best. But working smart is absolutely essential, because you really want to go on a path which is outcome driven, where you know what the outcome you're trying to seek and make sure you are channelizing all your energies towards achieving those outcomes. So that's one of the first lessons I learned in life. Now, the journey when it started from IIT, when I got my admission into, based on my rank, I had 2 or 3 subjects that were available to me in IIT. I think Naval Arch was one amongst them. And I decided to take up naval architecture because A, it sounded cool. B, I thought, wow, this shipbuilding, and I was always fascinated with ships and boats in my life. So
I think IIT Madras is the only place which gives degree on naval architecture, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think Kharagpur as well today.
Okay, only 2. Yeah, very.
Yes, absolutely, Srikant. So I joined that, and it was a great course, very, very mathematical, and it was a tough course. It was not an easy course. As you can imagine, it was mechanical engineering. You not only had to study all of the coursework that mechanical engineering students did, but over on top of that, subjects like hydrodynamics, being able, propeller design, and all those sort of things which are more specific to naval architecture. So after I graduated from naval architecture, I had a decision to make, and that's probably the decision that all of you are you have to make up your mind where to go next. And all of my friends, the conventional wisdom was during those days, okay, you're from IT, you need to apply app and go abroad, right? That was a conventional wisdom. Or the second path was, oh, should I do an MBA? Now, both of these paths didn't appeal to me, frankly. First thing is, I don't know why I should be going abroad, because I felt that our Indian government, having invested so much in me, I wanted to give something back to the country for sure. So there was a deep desire to not just go away just because you're okay. I had this IT, I need to go abroad. I didn't appeal too much, and MBA not really too much at that time, because I felt that IIT had trained me for a career in technology. I said, "Look, I'm not going to do justice to this, my degree, if I get into MBA. Maybe I might do an MBA at some point of time in my life, but it didn't really appeal to me." But in my BTech, there was one course that in particular appealed to me a lot. It was a course in probability and statistics. That I kind of really connected to that, because I could see that how probability and statistics played into real life in terms of how you may predict. When you're trying to predict something, you can only predict with a certain degree of confidence, and there was a statistical approach behind. So that appealed to me because that seemed very real to me, in terms of, because I felt in life there are situations where things work, things do not work. So it's full of possibilities. So I realized that statistics was one very important discipline, which related to every other field that I could. So I said, okay, look, I'm going to take this up. So, and I continued my education in IT. So I signed up for a master's in forecasting, because I thought that was a logical extension of my interest in probability and statistics. So while I was going through this course of a master's by research in the area of forecasting, that's when I got introduced to AI for the first time. There was a course offered by the computer science department. It was called Introduction to Neural Networks. And that course really fascinated me. So I decided to take that up after figuring out what this course was about. And I really fascinated me that when I understood that they were trying to use models of human brain, of neuroscience, to see how you could use that as a foundation for creating an intelligent systems. So far, till that point of time, AI was more like a kind of a generalized concept, where they were looking at a generalized artificial intelligence, and they had limited success, because till that point of time, they were all these rules-based systems. And then when they figured out that real life is so complex that you actually cannot have rules-based system to mimic intelligence, this to me sounded very fascinating, because it was approaching the problem like a human brain would process information. I think I really liked that, connected to that concept. So I took that course. I didn't need to. Actually, I didn't really need to. I just audited that course purely out of interest. And I'm glad I did that, because that really set me off on a new journey. I really loved the course. And then I decided to use part of the neural networks in my own research into forecasting. So I think that's where Srikar, you were talking about forecasting. So that's where I first introduced AI during those times, into how do I use neural networks and this basically artificial neural networks to be able to do much better forecasting than all of the forecasting models that were existing at that point of time. So that's how it started. And I think it was a well appreciated thesis. And after I graduated from there, I think my first job too, I wanted to continue my job in machine learning. So in my first job, I found a very interesting offer from Satyam Computers at that time. It's a discredited organization today, but it was
it is Tech Mahindra now.
Yeah, it is Tech Mahindra now.
But it was one of the pioneering software service organizations in India to start.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Srikar. So I think the late 90s specifically, it was riding on a high. Satyam was riding on a high.
Yes.
They had some really interesting projects, and there was one of those needs in Satyam that really fascinated me. They were looking for somebody with a neural networks background, and who could do software, who could write code as well. And as you can imagine, because of my research, I did end up learning coding as well at the time, to be able to implement all of these AI algorithms. So I kind of had a little bit of a coding experience, if you will, before I applied for this job. So I think I kind of fit that very well, because they're looking for somebody who could write code and also be able to implement AI. So I think I spent a couple of years of time just implementing, building products based on machine learning, implementing all of these algorithms. I've spent the first couple of years of time.
So I
And
think sorry, Sumanji. I think
yeah, go ahead, please.
I mean, maybe many of us, including me, would be of the opinion that AI is as a concept, as a technology is very new. Okay, maybe after 2010, okay, year 2010. However, here we are listening from you that you started from the moment you wanted to be in a professional system on
Yes.
AI itself. So this is like an enlightening moment for all of us. Okay, this is something which is very old, maybe found its prominence now.
Yes, no, absolutely. Srikar, actually, the response to your question is it's just not 1990s. You know, the journey of AI really started in 1950s, actually. A lot of people don't know that. So it all started with a couple of remarkable people. One of them was called Alan Turing. And the second influential person was called Marvin Minsky. Now, very interesting people. Now, this started really in 1950s. So Alan Turing came up with this computing machine, generalized computing machine, and he was considered the father of computer science. He is also considered the father of AI. And so Srikar, I'm not sure whether you watched this movie called The Imitation Game, which is a very, very well done movie. And that really is a story of Alan Turing about how he cracked. He also was into cryptography, AI, computer science, numerical optimization. He was a genius.
So
And
I
then,
think,
yeah,
sorry. So I think this brings to this particular scenario of maybe the infrastructure development of late and the usage of internet becoming very close to most of the population in the world. I think has fastened the things and maybe got this AI को push किया. But I think its journey started somewhere in 1950s as we see it right now.
yeah, absolutely correct.
And
So while
carry on,
Minsky
please.
and Alan Turing, as you pointed out, Srikar, as these two gentlemen started in 1950s, but you're right. What really accelerated this entire AI movement was compute. I mean, in one word, compute, storage. This really triggered the revolution because even when I was doing my masters, all the algorithms and the theoretical framework was already in place by then. The foundation for AI was already laid by the time it was 1990s. But however, we didn't have enough compute. We didn't have such compute environments during that time, which allowed somebody to apply these large neural networks to problems with where the data was very huge. And
Yes.
that's where the true value was. And they could not apply that. And so for a long time, it existed more in as a theoretical computer science discipline, where it
Understood.
was to do that as a course, but people say, hey, look, this is great, but how much is it practical? Can you really apply that? So that comes back to your observation
Yes.
that since only in the last 10, 15 years, once all of this entire compute took off, your storage became much cheaper.
And if cloud computing came into picture, now these days internet getting very accessible, super
Yeah,
fast.
exactly. So all of these kind of led towards now AI becoming mainstream, right? But interestingly, the theoretical framework was already there in place
Yeah,
by the 90s.
now it is very evident that your travel with AI was from last 23 years.
Yes.
So yeah, we can even see that okay, when you're trying to explain things in terms of AI, there is the deep understanding which is coming into picture on the face of it. So I mean, so that having to, I mean, applying that experience and maybe from your viewpoint, if you can let us know at this moment. Uh, Even though AI is considered as the fourth industrial revolution, are taking its central role in technology propagation, major people, if we consider the student community who are about to get into professionals as someone from elite institutions who wanted to be entrepreneurs as one set, and then someone who from elite institutions want to get into job, and there are other set of students who have to fight it out in order to find their space, okay, when compared to the other two categories. Okay, from these students perspective at this moment, uh, as we were discussing earlier also, there seems to be a perceived or imaginary barrier for all these people to venture into AI as their first step. So from your experience, can you let us know, is such barrier really exist, or is it imaginary? First of all, the second thing is, even though if there is a barrier, even if it is big or small, how these people to cross it and then see their future in AI?
No, very good question, Srikar. So let me try to explain what those barriers are. Very good question, because barrier does exist. And I want to talk about what that perceived barrier is and how do students overcome it. But before I get to that, in terms of, let me, if you don't mind, making a quick point on
Please,
why,
go.
why AI is important today is actually really a moot point today, because you see evidence of AI everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go to Google search and hit a Google search, there is AI happening in the background. You go for a shopping experience on Amazon or any of those, there is AI working behind the scenes. You go to Netflix to watch content, and there is an AI algorithm that is constantly trying to understand you. So everything that you interact with in life today is becoming more and more smarter in a certain sense, and there is AI behind it. So in a sense, you could argue that AI is already there. It has disrupted already. It's already around you. It's already around you in your daily life, and it is already beginning to impact everybody's daily life. So there is obviously everybody has to understand what this AI is, how do they interact with it, and how does it impact in the future. So clearly, you need to understand that. Now, in terms of the barriers, so Srikar, the barriers are this, right? A lot of people, first barrier is people tend to think it is very abstract, it is very mathematical. I probably will not be, people might think, hey, you know what, I probably will not be able to handle this. I need to spend years understanding math, maybe getting a degree in math to be able to understand. That is one barrier, number one.
Yeah.
And to that, I say that it is actually not as much as a barrier that you think it is. And let me put it that way. So, and why am I saying this? The math itself, mostly students from STEM disciplines who are coming from a STEM and kind of a technical background, math is not a barrier. For them, it is less of a barrier. Let me put it that way. But on the other hand, the level of math that you really need for being a successful, let me call it data scientist, if you will, because that is one of those roles that actually got created due to AI revolution. Now, every company has data scientists today. The level of math is really university level. And that kind of university level math, whether you are from a commerce background, you're from economic background, you are from the computer background, engineering background, any of those, unless you are from a completely arts background in which you have absolutely no exposure to math at all, basic level of university math is actually good enough for you to build a foundation.
Okay.
That is a perceived, and it's not hard to solve it today. Srikar, learning, the paradigm of learning has changed today. You no longer, suppose somebody needs to get into AI and they feel, okay, look, I must upgrade my basic math skills. You don't have to go back to university anymore. You don't have to spend 2 years getting an MS program in data science, or you don't have to get an MS program in computer science to be a data scientist.
Yes.
All you need is a basic understanding that I need a basic level of math. Today, there are enough dime a dozen resources out in the internet
I
for you
think
that
through
very
it,
basic level math. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I was talking about these sources which they have, online sources which they can apply to, and in 2-3 months they can um, well verse themselves with becoming a data scientist or whatever it is. Yeah, please
Yes,
continue.
yes, correct. So that math is really not a barrier. I think that's what I wanted to get out of the way first.
Yeah.
And even for somebody who's not from a traditional STEM kind of discipline, I mean, imagine I have somebody on the call today, Dr. Shubra, who was the previous speaker. He was training to be a medical doctor,
Mhm.
but then she had to relearn math. I mean, she's coming from a background in which she was supposed to get into healthcare, but she pivoted in her life, learned math, enough math for her to be able to handle math, maybe not towards AI, but enough of sophisticated math to be able to get into marketing, do analysis, work with analytics, which itself requires I would say, fairly high skill, high level of math. So it's possible. I think it's a question of how do you get to that point? Are you motivated enough to be able to go and make that effort towards actually learning that kind of math? That is the first barrier, and I think it can be solved. From my experience, I've seen. So while you will see a lot of data science professionals in the industry today with MS and PhD backgrounds in math, computer science or data science, which itself actually has got created as a new stream, both at undergrad and postgrad levels nowadays. But the point that I'm trying to make is, you can either train to be a very theoretical kind of data scientist into building algorithms from scratch if you come from these sort of backgrounds. But remember, in AI too, there are two. You can be a theoretician in terms of inventing new algorithms, inventing new ways of understanding data, or you can be a practical applied data scientist where you can take a concept and apply it. So that kind of made me said, and most of the what the industry needs today, they need both, of course. Now, there will be a need for very theoretical kind of data scientists in really high-end tech for very specialized jobs, but I would say 90 to 95% of the jobs that I have seen across multiple industry verticals, whether it's telecom, healthcare, retail, or any of these big industries, the need is really for somebody who can very practically apply this. Very practically. Oh, I think I got disconnected.
Yeah, sorry. So Manji, I think we lost you for a bit of 10 seconds or so. You can please continue.
So yeah, Srikar. So the point I'm making is, whatever, regardless of what background that you may come from, you can make those efforts to cross that barrier of math, number one. Now, how about other barrier which I hear student ask me, oh, I don't have any work experience in this. Why do you think somebody is going to consider me or entertain my job request, right? Now, this is a good question. Now, the answer to that is really not, it is like any other job that you're applying to. I mean, the question is, okay, do you have certain experience in this or not? Now, to be able to answer that question, the way to do that is what we do that is one of the reasons I do a lot of kind of a course, sessions, if you will, coursework with students, where I kind of walk them through, if you practically wanted to skill yourself, not only just the technical side of how to apply these algorithms, but take some practical use cases that you can actually build on your own, and you build something like hobbyist, like, if you will. So there is a certain phase where you have to call yourself an AI hobbyist, if you will. So as an AI hobbyist, can I take up some of the data and build some models myself in which I can actually go to an interview and demonstrate and say, look, this is what I did. I improved on the performance. One good example. There is a portal called Kaggle.com, Kaggle, and these guys hold competitions. Any amateur data scientist, hobbyist can go into that portal. In fact, there's prize money as well. In fact, there are leaderboards. You can compete with different people around the world, and you can build your own data science models, submit your models. And if you go to Kaggle.com, I mean, I would urge you all to go and register in Kaggle.com if you already haven't done that. It's an excellent portal.
Yeah, Kaggle.com. If you can spell, I think it would be they can write it down.
Let me just type it into the live chat. That's right.
Yeah.
This is something that absolutely I would encourage you to go and sign up for this. Not only a great resource for learning data science, but allows you to be part of their leaderboards, be part of their projects. And if you're able to build good models which rank very well, and you could also get to a situation where you actually can win prize money. But regardless of whether you win prize money or not, there's a huge learning experience of work that you do on this. Now, also, this barrier can be crossed in another way as well, Srikar.
I think talking about the other option of crossing this barrier, if I can just extend this from this particular barrier, saying that, okay, as a hobby they can maybe become a data scientist or work on these kind of projects. Now, as we are entering more into a tech-driven world, and these days every company is being called a technology-based company, irrespective of wherever they are, whatever they're doing. Okay. So in this scenario, for the students who are just coming out at this moment into the professional world, what are the minimum technological skill sets they need to possess, along with maybe this being as hobbies? Earlier, I think maybe during your time it was car driving, swimming, all this are some of the skill sets, or maybe some of these hobbies which people have, they can pursue to be okay. Good thing. So this way, moving forward for these people, what are those technological skill sets?
Excellent. Great question, Sujikar. Fantastic question. So, Sujikar, very right. One thing good you pointed out in this question is, great, you know math, you know as a hobbyist, you can work with all this, but what are those technology components that you need to know? Very good. So I'll answer the question in two parts. Today, in the job market, I will talk about what kind of roles or skills they are looking for from a technology perspective. And the second part of the answer, I can talk to you about how do you go and acquire those skills.
Please.
So let me do that. I'll answer your question. First is today in the job market, if you are looking for a data science job, I think first thing I've already said, you don't need to be a PhD in math, you don't need to be an MS in math or any of those data science. That's you got that part of it.
Yes.
Now, from a technology perspective, today the kind of jobs that a data scientist is definitely is one role that you keep hearing, and everybody wants to be a data scientist. Now, remember, data scientist is not necessarily a software engineer as well. Data scientist is not expected to be a great software engineer. Being a great software engineer, being able to develop code as according to the best software engineering practice is really nice to have, but I would say it's not a must have, because a job of a data scientist is to analyze the business, to see how can I improve certain business metrics based on AI, know enough technology to be able to conduct experiments, know enough technology to be able to build models. But there are other roles, like there is a role called machine learning engineer, ML engineer.
Yes.
Now, machine learning engineers are actually more in demand nowadays compared to data scientists, because their level of technology skills, whether it's Python, whether it's Java, I mean, these are two of those languages that are popularly used, and I would say Python at the top of the list. That is the platform that is de facto standard for data science and AI today. And so ML engineers are more, I would say they come from more of a software engineering background who have got into data science. So they are approaching data science, they're already coming from a very technical Python background as a software engineer. They are slapping on data science skills on top of that, and that makes them marketable for a ML engineer kind of role. Now, there's another role called, which you will keep hearing, called DevOps, ML Ops, and these kind of roles. So these kind of roles are for all those professionals who are not necessarily now looking at a development point of view, but how do you create these AI systems at scale that operate flawlessly and seamlessly? How do you make it a painless experience for organizations to adopt AI and without things breaking, and how do you create seamless and trouble-free systems? So that they kind of approach the problem very differently. Now, based on whatever background you're coming from, so Sujikar, suppose you are going for a data scientist, then your path would be, just have to know enough of coding, Python, if you will, and the same way that you go to Kaggle, Python is something which is actually, I would say, is a very simple language to learn for being able to write code. It is not as complex as computer languages like C, C++, and Java used to be in the past, because they are far more complex, they are far more rigid, strongly typed languages. Whereas Python is more loose, basically meant for somebody to get busy very fast, to learn very fast. So Python is something that you can, as a hobbyist, I would suggest.
Python is something which anyone can learn very easily. We say it will be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, in fact, I do, when I teach data science courses, I also do teach data science courses. I kind of take an approach of just teaching enough Python for you to be dangerous as a data scientist. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
Enough Python to be dangerous. You don't have to be an expert at Python. Now, to be dangerous, you need to know a few things well. How do you handle data structures? Okay. How do you handle large volumes of data? How do you work with matrices? There are 5 or 6 things like that you need to know well, and that doesn't take very long to learn. So I usually teach courses in such a way, I don't really separate out saying the language from the core data science concept. To me, both of them go together. It's a language of expression. So what I do is I just introduce just enough Python for people to be dangerous so that you can train as a data scientist. Now, somebody wants to train as an ML engineer, a barrier for entry is slightly high for somebody who's come a complete non-software kind of background, because this is really highly technical. So I would suggest that always look at things like data analysis. Uh, and of course, there are other roles that you should consider as well in this entire AI space, right? AI is just not about being a data scientist. You can also be a expert on visualizations too. I mean, that is part of the mainstream analytics, but to get to data science, analytics is also a great stepping stone. For that, you don't need to be expert, you don't need to be an expert programmer. For you should be able to work with, all you need is just have enough graphing skills, if you will. That's like really basic graphing skills. How do you develop bar charts, histograms, and all of these? And how do you use tools in the market like Power BI and Tableaus of the world to be able to learn how actually to do this visualization, which is again not a barrier for entry, is not very high. So I think, Jigar, all I'm saying is from a technology perspective, it's if you are getting to be a data scientist, I would say don't have to worry so much about technology. The learning that you have is enough Python to be dangerous. You of course you will, as part of being a data scientist, you will also learn some frameworks today like TensorFlow, PyTorch, and some of these popular frameworks that is typically applied for model building, and that's enough to get you started. Now,
yeah, got it. Got your point, Sumanji.
Yeah.
I think for a data scientist, the barriers are lower. For machine learning engineer, maybe they are a bit higher in a way. But at this moment in the present educational ecosystem, we have proper opportunities to well verse ourselves and then take it forward from there.
Yes.
Now, extending a little bit more, increasing the pie a little bit more in terms of overview. If you're talking about technology domain-based jobs, be it web development, be it mobile app development, be it DevOps, be it software engineering, and even data science and associated roles, moving forward in next 10 years, can we have a overview of what percentage of jobs, for example, 100% occupies this entire tech domain? Maybe web development will hold 30% of the jobs, or data science will hold those many percent. Can we have a perspective of that?
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. So let's see what will happen to some of those mainstream, let's say engineering jobs, if you will, the mainstream software engineering.
Yes.
Now, web development is an interesting example, Sujikarji, and you already know that web development is getting more and more to a situation where even non-technical people can start developing their own websites, and we are already at that point today, as you can see.
Yes.
And let's say 15 years back, you needed to know JavaScript, you needed to know all these server-side Java frameworks, and go through a long project for you to even get a basic website together. Today, basic website, I can just go and there are dime and dozen tools around for me to very quickly put a website together.
Yes. Just take HTML sheets or some images, put in the right information. We are done with the website in 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So it is getting to such a point. Now, of course, the web development, I think where people are focusing more on the creative side of it. How do I present a website that has maximum outreach? How do I get my digital marketing efforts through my website? That's a different problem, and that requires a different set of skills. Now, in terms of the mainstream, I think software itself, if you see, there is some very interesting work that is happening in AI now, which will kind of minimize the need for you to be an expert programmer anymore. I mean, that will kind of start reducing where you will increasingly see the level of software expertise actually that requirement kind of go down, because in the future AI will, now today I'm seeing, for example, let me take an example. There is a model today in the industry called GPT-3. It's called GPT-3, and it was initially started by Elon Musk and as part of the Open AI Alliance. And today they spent around $12 to $15 million building a model, and they trained that model on everything that they could find on the internet. That's how big that model is. It's called GPT-3, and it does some amazing things. Now, one of those amazing things that they are trying it for is, can I apply this to code? Because code at the end of the day is also a language, right? See, they train GPT-3 on all the human language or the natural language that you find on the internet. But we are trying to apply that on the foundation of programming, which is the language. Can I apply this on language? Can I generate language? So for example, in the future, I would see in the next 10, 15 years, you go to a point where developers don't need to go from this. They will have so many of these frameworks which are attached to natural language processing. So if you are a logical thinker, just using pseudocode and a certain level of commands, I should be actually able to generate code.
Okay, so yeah, I think so. From web development now becoming anyone's job, even coding
Yeah.
is gonna become anyone's job moving forward. Maybe in another 3-4
Yeah,
years.
we are moving towards that situation. And not only that, I'm going to say that at some point of time in the future, even a sort of data scientist job also is going to change. See, today data scientist job predominantly is about building models, understanding business problems, working with models, doing all of these different experiments. So data scientists are also today becoming very domain experts also, if you will, because without understanding the nature of the business, it's hard to build artificial intelligence models for those. But interestingly, what will happen in the data science? So today there's an entire field emerging in AI called AutoML, auto machine learning, where can I automate the process of actually even building a model? Why do I need a data scientist to manually spend all those hours cleaning up data, be able to build models manually? Why can't I automate that process where I present data to an algorithm and the algorithm is able to figure out what is the best set of hyperparameters, or maybe even the best fit for a specific algorithm, or a combination of these different AI algorithms to be able to solve a specific problem. So the nature of a data scientist also will change, because then data science will become more of a kind of a, think of it like a project manager for data science who's just overseeing all these experiments.
Yes. So I think from what you say, I clearly understand that whichever profile you are in at this moment, okay,
Yeah.
be it web development, be it data scientist, whatever it is, be ready for disruption. It is gonna happen, and it is gonna happen very fast. And
Yes.
so be agile there. Okay, it's
Yes,
not
be
about
agile.
you're not guaranteed with the technologies which you know at this moment sustain you through the life, like what our fathers or forefathers generally in the engineering jobs then they had, uh, we're able to do. But I think here we need to be agile enough to shift to new technologies and requirements as and they come up, right? I think that
Yes.
is what.
No, in fact, the discussion that we are seeing, Sujika, I think it will be very interesting for the audience that are listening to it, is not just in these engineering, software engineering jobs, right? The disruption is across the board. See, if you are, let's say you're going for a sales career, you want to go for a marketing career, all of these fields are going to be completely disrupted today. Now, marketing is one area that is going to be so disrupted by data science, because see, today marketing, they're talking about the language, they call it hyper personalization, where they are no longer in the past, marketing used to segment populations to understand your consumer behavior. See, whether the consumers are telecom consumers, whether they are your retail consumers, or consumers across any other vertical. In the old world, they used to segment. They used to say, okay, look, let me try to understand different populations, and then either run some specific marketing campaigns or real-time promotions. They used to do that in the past. Today it's all hyper personalized. It's all based on your individual, the behavior of the individual. Now it is, how do you do marketing treatment in such a specialized way, by understanding the entire customer intimately through AI, to see what kind of marketing action should I apply, and when should I apply, which will yield the maximum return.
And
So
at the end of it, the digital scenario coming into picture is making
yeah,
this possible, right? So
yeah,
even that way, Sumanji, when I started my career 10 years back, the way business development was handled then was very different from now. Okay. There is a
yes,
lot of disruption. I think moving forward, it will be even more disruptive. As you said, it is going to become hyper local and hyper
yeah,
personalized.
hyper personal. And Sridhar, you would have observed, you're right. It is
Yeah.
all on account of digitization is driving that. You're absolutely correct. Because see, once a customer, whether he is signing up for a telecom service, a customer is signing up for a utility service, or any other service, the way large companies are, the way they manage that information is they see the digital footprints of the customer right from the very start of the first engagement with your company. So whether the engagement is happening through, regardless of any channel, whether the engagement is through call center, whether you make a phone call, or your engagement is through your digital websites, or your engagement is through your mobile app channels, every
Yes.
single information that you are generating is being collected. They are being they go into your customer relationship management systems, CRM systems, and from CRM you have all of these different data marts and data warehouses which collect all
Yes.
of data to be able to predict consumer
I
behavior.
think I see a lot of automation already in place, be it workflows, be it email sequences, or any other message sequences, whatever it is. Now, for a business development executive or manager, the role is entirely different.
Yes.
I think at this moment. So, yeah, and Sumanji, this 1 hour time is becoming very, very small for us to absorb. Okay, insights from you. So, if
So we
with
can
your
always do
permission,
a follow-up session as well. We can always do a follow-up session, but very fascinating discussion. Let's keep going.
yeah. So can we extend it till 7:15 in the interest of audience? If you
Yeah,
don't have any
absolutely.
other
Yeah,
commitment.
happy.
Thank you, Sumanji. So I think we will discuss maybe on 1 or 2 more questions from my
Yes,
end, and
yes.
then after which we will try to take questions from audience. Tanvi,
Perfect.
please help me with the questions.
Yeah.
So now, in terms of, I think uh, real world scenario at this moment, we know disruption is happening because of AI, and the job landscape itself is changing. Uh, as we right now discussed about marketing and sales domains getting disrupted a lot. So, in the next 5-6 years, what are the jobs which you see are gonna go out of the market space because of the advent of AI?
Okay, advent of AI. Now, see, immediately, let's see the shift that is already happening today. Now, I will give an answer based on the real situations that I'm seeing, Sujika.
Please.
Now, in the past, right, I think let's connect the dots where you had a certain disruption happen because of internet, because of information technology in the past, and the kind of disruption, what kind of jobs were lost. But then there are different kind of nature of jobs that got added. Now here, but there is one difference if you observe. See, in the past, the disruption was on jobs which were slightly lower in the value chain, in which was very manual and it could easily be done by a machine. Those sort of jobs that kind of started. But now you are coming to a situation where you are coming to an aspect of intelligence where decision making also can be enabled by AI, and through this decision making today AI is strongly getting aligned to another area called which is called RPA, or the robotic process automation, or in general they just call it automation, where based on the decisions that you take you can go to the last mile and actually make those changes. So that level of so the kind of jobs now that are beginning to get displaced are even higher up in the value chain, something which requires more analysis,
Yeah, being
something
supervisor, manager, and above decision making
exactly.
roles.
So it is going to disrupt a wider cross section of people. Previously, the jobs you thought were safe because somebody had to do a lot of manual work analyzing data to be able to do their job and take a decision. All of those managers and all of them will get, because today in the future, think of this situation, Sujika. Now, in the future, you will have all of this enterprise data in such a manner with this giant AI, compute that is working on it, which is able to translate business language into questions, or the natural language questions into technical questions, which can go and query data at real time, get you the kind of insights that you need for driving a business, and get and do all of that at real time. I mean,
Okay.
imagine that situation. Today,
Yes.
you're going through the entire value chain where what happens today? So the directors of a specific department, okay, they say, okay, look, I want to improve the business metrics of my department. So they will have a team of, business intelligence specialists. You'll have a team of data analysts. All of these guys putting together all of these reports, analytics, and all of that. They do that. But if I see into the future, all of these different jobs will go away because AI will drive this to such an extent that AI and analytics itself will get merged into a big analysis capability that will be driven by language, where you can just have a natural language, you can have natural conversations, you can have conversational bots where like every lot of these jobs will have in the future you'll start seeing virtual assistants where for doing my job I have a virtual assistant and I can figure okay, what do I think I should do next, and based on the data it can analyze and it can tell you what are the different paths you should take.
So I think the way I see it here is maybe 10, 15 years or maybe 20 years down the line, even the curriculum of MBA or PGDM, Masters of Business, I think courses need a revive, rehashing there and shaking up. Because most of these people are getting trained for this kind of decisions, right? So that they
Yes.
get the data, do business analysis, and then provide with the proper outlook for the senior management in
Yes.
terms of strategy. So if that is being taken care by artificial intelligence, so we are looking at a altogether different level of disruption here.
Yeah, it is altogether different level. Now, one of those use cases I keep seeing very frequently, Sujikar, it might be very interesting for your audience, is we talk to a lot of customers for AI needs in the area of customer care. How do you enhance the customer experience based on AI? That's a big problem statement, which a lot of customers today are very interested in that. And the kind of disruption that will cause is today, you see, at least in North America, that has started to happen, is when you call in, whether you call your bank, whether you call your telecom service provider, or you call your utility provider, not as a bots that are answering your calls. You can call a bank and ask, okay, it'll recognize you. You can ask, tell me about my account information, or some basic FAQ kind of questions. A lot of these bots today are capable of doing. But now, as the bot get more sophisticated, now they can pretty much do everything that a call center agent can do today.
I think much better.
And much better. Exactly. And no wait times. Imagine, see, one cause for frustration for most of the customers is having to wait 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and sometimes up to hours when you call up a call center and just waiting for somebody to answer your call. Now, imagine if you want to improve that experience on account of AI, then you have this virtual assistants, and imagine you're slapping on technologies like GPT-3 and you're driving it in steroids to the level that at one point of time, what they call Turing test. See, if you heard of something called the Turing test, Turing test is if a machine interacts with you in such a manner, you cannot differentiate between a machine, whether it's a machine or a human.
Okay.
It will pass a Turing's test. You will not even know that you are actually speaking to a bot. So if I can do that through a bot, there is a huge cost component that big companies invest. There's a huge cost element to maintaining this huge call centers throughout the world. All of that cost, if you get this right, is significantly reduced, or at some stage will probably go away.
I think every business will jump onto that solution if it is provided even today.
Yeah, no, it's already happening.
Just from the cost, from my own experience of startups and all this, I can understand that even from the cost point of view, even if it is 20 to 30% higher than what is happening from manual sources, I think people will go with this solution because they know a lot of things get sorted out because of.
And most importantly, like a call center agent, AI doesn't have a bad day, right? It will perform optimally on every day.
Yes, exactly. So coming here, my personal example here, in India also, some of the banks with whom I have account with, the bots are making the calls and then trying to talk to me. So even when I reply, it is trying to reply back appropriately, but not, I can say it's not to the level where we will feel, okay, I am satisfied with this service, but I think it has started. So as an extension to this experience, in terms of AI, and Indian manpower, human resources being kind of base for most of the technology innovation and services sector across the world, be it in US also. Okay, we having that human resource capabilities. Now, at least in this industrial revolution, which is going to be driven by AI, where are we standing in terms of country when compared to North America at this moment, or Europe for that moment? So, are we almost in tandem, or maybe we are a lot to catch up? How are we looking at it?
Great question, Sujikar. So, I would have loved to say that we are on par. I would have loved to say that we are ahead. But the situation is we are kind of lagging behind in that race compared to China and US. We are nearly 5 to 10 years behind in terms of what in that, and we have to catch up. There is no other way, but we have no choice but to catch up. Let me put it that way.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is in the future, because of the disruption that is caused by AI across practically every human vertical that you can imagine, it means in the future, the countries that will be dominant will be the countries who will have the best AI.
Yes.
In AI, who can automate the maximum and whose AI is capable of working across every vertical, and then even things like defense of the country, the very basic concept of how do you defend yourself, the concept of warfare, your military, all of that is going to be driven by AI. So it is very important for us to catch up in that game because China and US are ahead and they are and this is the gap is kind of exponentially increasing. So we certainly have to catch up. So there is a lot of first. That's why it's part of my mission to when I hold through CEI live projects is to expose as many students as possible, encouraging them to that, guys, you need to get into this now, because as a country we need this right now. We need highly skilled people in AI who are transforming India based on AI. And for us, it's a huge opportunity because this will allow us to just leapfrog from where we are and go to the next generation. And in fact, even go ahead of China and the US. And because of the skill levels, today, unfortunately, Sujikar ji, what is happening is, even in AI, see, for example, software, let's look at the concept of software, right? Information technology is when really world started taking notice of India. I mean, all of us know that. But I think we missed a boat there, because while we were very good at providing services, backend services, be able to implement and execute something in the backend, but we missed out the boat on building world-class products. I mean, we didn't have those Googles and Apples of the world. We didn't create those.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe
of course,
an entrepreneurship viewpoint was missing then.
yes, absolutely. Entrepreneurship ecology was completely missing. Now I'm very hopeful that with the entrepreneurship ecology evolving and the knowledge and awareness of what AI can do will actually allow us to leapfrog ahead of the others. And it's my firm belief, and I want to kind of play a role in that mission, what I really call AI for Bharat. So I think AI for Bharat too, I just want to kind of conclude my answer to this question, Sujikar. One of those discussions that's going on in India, recently I was listening to a podcast. This was the chief data scientist of Reliance, and he was making a very interesting point. He was saying that, look, the way AI was applied in the West, see, is based on their Western concept of materialism and how they look at the world. So, they want to maximize profits. They want to do. I think as I'm seeing, there's some questions on how does AI. What if the AI makes the system, humans more
Lethargic.
questions there. So what is happening in that is West looked at AI from a completely different perspective. How do they make their lives simpler? And they looked at it very differently. Now, I think India, we should not necessarily ape the West in what they're trying to do. I think we have to take a original viewpoint, if you will, in terms of AI. Look at the problems our country faces today, and where we need to go, and how AI needs to be evolved to apply to Indian needs. So I think we have to look at AI from a very, very different viewpoint, and not necessarily go with how the West has been doing it. I think with that,
I think adding a bit to your viewpoint here, exactly, I believe in it and then strongly agree to your viewpoint there. That is where I was reading through a PricewaterhouseCoopers report on AI in India for at least next 5 or 6 years. I was happy to come across Niti Aayog and even Ministry of Commerce, even 4 years back, creating a work group to make a blueprint for AI utilization in various industries, including agriculture.
Yes.
Okay? And see how we can use it for our even public or public utilities front as well, in providing good governance and all. So right now, can we at least be optimistic from a Bharat point of view that at this moment we are having a entrepreneurial ecosystem, maybe which is at least 15 years older now, and so now looking at creating our own products and core product and solution rather than services themselves, and then second, maybe government support or futuristic vision from the government end, and the human resource capital which we have as a country. So with these three, maybe if we can, as you said, 10-15 years gap, if we can.
There's one more important factor to this. All the factors that you said are absolutely correct. And we have one more very important resource that we have: data. Let's not forget data, because
population.
Because of the efforts of government now, and they've taken some really good decisions in terms of having all these digital platforms now, all of this Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and all of these different initiatives. We have collected a lot of excellent information for us. So in terms of citizen delivery of services, it can play a huge role, actually, AI, because we have all of the data with us. We have an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Now all it takes is to skill ourselves on AI. That is only missing.
That is where maybe the support and guidance from people like you would be paramount importance. And for someone like us, be it MyWays also, as we are the core product of MyWays is all about personalized career guidance which has the AI and machine learning to the as depth as possible. Okay,
Yes.
and maybe your guidance for people like my ways, maybe we can look at the aspect of
Yeah.
catching US and maybe going beyond them in another 20-25 years time at least.
Yeah, absolutely happy to help. Very, very exciting discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Sumanji, for your. I mean, it was a very, very insightful discussion, and then we can see the experience which you had coming out. Okay, and I think this time is very, very little. Sorry, I had to maybe take you to different questions when you're about to explain further on the questions which I asked as such. Um, Thanks a lot for your time and inputs here. Maybe as we are approaching 7:15 almost, we will take a question or two from the audience also.
Sujikar, what I've done is I have pasted my LinkedIn profile to this. So I would encourage everybody who's in the audience, please feel free to reach out to me because I'm very personally passionate about, like Srikar just mentioned, I'm very passionate about AI for Bharat. And as an organization, even in CEI, we are driving all of those very exciting initiatives. For example, there are projects on some on precision agriculture. We are engaged in some of those other projects, like on the military side as well, building, adding AI to this, lot of these drones. So there's some really interesting work that we are doing as an organization. So I'm very happy to engage with your audience through my LinkedIn and happy to support them.
And we would love to have you have these kind of interactions with us as many as possible, even though considering that you will have very little time for yourself to accommodate these kind of sessions, but we'll be with you, maybe trying to follow it up to find some time from you.
Look forward. So Sujikar, you want me to take one or two questions?
Yeah, one or two questions. I think coming to this humans lethargic, if I can rephrase it a bit, can we say because of the intervention of AI, even till that business developmentations to that level, will the humans as such moving forward lose out on the genius or genius gap, if we can say, gets created because of lack of need to even think that way?
No, I don't necessarily think so. So let me qualify my answer saying that, see, throughout human technology history and our material progress since the time of Industrial Revolution. So I think Anushi asked that question. So Anushi, if you see that every stage of technology evolution, life is increasingly getting easier. Now, in fact, some argue that we are at a point of time in our history where, although we see a lot of issues in the world, still we are at a most non-violent portion of our history for the last 2,000 years. I mean, many would actually argue that.
Yes,
so if you look at that, so I would think there is a lot more to accomplish in the following generations, actually, in terms of how things can get simpler. Now, your role as a human, if you see today, man as an animal lost all of those native animal kind of instincts long back. But if you consider that, saying, okay, look, we lost those instincts, but we did something better. Our brain grew at the same time. So in the future, as you go towards AI gets more and more sophisticated, I see a strong possibility where human and machine intelligence will get integrated. And in fact, a new species might emerge where your augmentation of your own intelligence will be at an all-time high. Now, let me give you an example. Elon Musk has been working on this technology in brain hacking, where you hack into somebody's brain.
Yeah.
Now, he recently did a small demo. I mean, they are at the starting point of the process, but they will get there. And in that process, they are seeing how can I embed a chip in my brain where even instead of using a mobile phone, can I get information downloaded directly to my brain? Can I, and whatever, not only download information, but can it also help me process some of the information that is getting downloaded to my brain? So you can imagine if you have embedded chips that are augmenting your own intelligence, and what is the limit to that? I mean, you can't even imagine the kind of limits that you have.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's an
maybe there is no limit, as you said, and I think that is coming from a materialistic perspective. When it is coming from America, if I take that liberty of putting that point there, from an Indian perspective, there maybe if you look at in a psychology or philosophical point of view, maybe from an Indian mindset, we would look at as the sustenance is being taken care of right now. Till now, maybe the fight was for the sustenance of human beings. Okay, to get the resources to make their life simple, luxurious, or whatever it is. Now, as once all those are attained, maybe we might look into understanding what we are as people, looking
Yes.
inward or whatever it is. Maybe we would use AI that way to an extent.
No,
And
no, no. Also,
I think
I
this.
think just to add to the point, in fact, you very nice point you made. I wish we had more time to describe this, but maybe we'll do it next time. I think next time we'll also talk about, you're very rightly pointed out, because the AI that is being developed in the West is a very materialist perspective of AI. That's why India, how we look at AI, it must be basically based on a dharmic tradition. And how do you make sure that's an AI which kind of sustains ourselves through the next, not just generations, but for the longest possible time ahead. And the way you should look at AI is a completely different area, but we'll talk about it next time. I have some nice
Yes, I
point of.
think that will lead to entirely different discussion, and I think it will be very futuristic in nature as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So maybe one last question. Is there anything else? Okay. Chance to get customized guidance from tech leaders and other. Yeah. Okay. That is Sribhaiji writing.
uh, do we have to go ahead with a few more questions, or should I end it here?
Yeah. I think I don't see any more questions anyway.
Yeah, I think they are not. I mean, Tanvi has to put in here. Anyways, I think we are even out of time, and I don't want to extend this any further at this moment, at least, because we are beyond 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
Sujit, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and absolutely by all means, I would love to continue engage with you, your team, and absolutely happy to discuss more on future sessions as well. And thanks for inviting me and for this opportunity to talk to your audience.
pleasure is all ours, Sumanji. Thanks for your time
Yeah.
for joining from Canada, and Lahari ji, thanks for being in and then giving the introduction of Suman Kalyan ji. And yeah, with Suman ji as well as Lahari ji, I see a lot of collaboration possibilities and also guidance needs as far as MyOS is concerned moving forward, and even for the student community or the candidate community. We will try to see if we can add much more value in association with you people. So thanks a lot for the keynote session. It was a great interaction for me as well, and I can see the deep insights, and I so feel this is very little time I had so to pack many things in. So thanks that way, Sumanji.
Thank
Now
you.
for all the audience, thanks for being part of this celebration, 1 year celebration of ours, which we call the Enthusiastic Summit 2021. Thanks for getting it a grand success, and all the sessions, be it workshops, be it project live project sessions which happened, be it live open sessions, all these will be made in the form of videos and various other content, and across the next 1 week or 10 days we'll be sharing them and then putting them on the YouTube and Facebook and associated channels, whichever we have. So thanks a lot again, everyone. Have a good night, and have a good remaining part of Sunday as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sujit.
Signing off from my